Hey, this is Tim Ellis back with another art lesson. Last video I was showing you how you could make a large scaled up drawing, but I didn't really show you how to create the drawing itself. I showed you how to make the grid and how to scale it up. So let's take a look at how you could actually do something like that. So in this lesson, I'm going to show you how to actually begin a large scale drawing, how to double everything using a grid, and eventually how to make it a beautiful charcoal portrait. So here we go. Let's see. So this is the photo that of Tom Holland that my son asked me to draw a couple years ago. So I did this as a lesson, and I thought I would just do it again as a basic how to get started with scaling up a drawing. I know it's a little hard to see on this paper because I've made my grid pretty light, but I've gridded it up so that there's a grid running right down the middle here and right along the top. So every square on this grid is the exact same size as my original paper. If you're not sure how I got from here to here, you can watch the last video, which I will link as to how to create this grid. And if you look really carefully at what I've got here, I've gridded this paper also down the middle and halfway so that each of these halfway size pieces, rectangles on this paper are exactly double here. So, you know, this is double here. So when I draw this rectangle, it'll be double size. So what will this look like when it's done? So here's the drawing that I'm actually still working on this with my physical classroom students. And let me show you what I got here. So this is the large Tom Holland portrait that I've been working on with them. Let me just straighten that out so you can see a little bit better. And you can see it's scaled up. I've got most of my shading done and the proportions are correct. And now all I'm doing is working on my tones and my highlights and all that sort of stuff. So I'll kind of show you how I get started with this. So I teach how to begin drawing and how to draw realistically. So if you're not ready for this one and you want to watch some more of my how do you begin thinking about drawing realistically, I have an entire course where you can learn that, and I even have some free lessons, so I'll link that down below as well. If you sign up to my website mailing list, you can access those free lessons as well. So if you feel like you can't draw, you've been told, you know, you just don't have talent, it requires talent to draw, malarkey. Anybody can learn to draw realistically. So not a big believer in talent here. Definitely a big believer in if you have the desire to be able to draw, you can do it. And I've taught literally thousands of students how to draw realistically and with great success. So anyway, let's talk about this a little bit. So what we're going to do is I recommend starting with what I call a quick sketch. Lots of artists use this concept, and a quick sketch is going to be literally where you're sketching quickly, simplifying things. So I'm not talking about drawing with symbols and this is how you draw an eye and this is how you draw a head from shapes you've memorized, but breaking things down into their simplest forms. So starting with an oval for the head, starting with almond shapes for the eyes, not because they're going to stay that way, because we just want to map out where things are. So I'm not a big believer in measuring initially, but we definitely want to measure after we've done our quick sketch. So we'll do a quick sketch, then we'll do what I call a measured quick sketch, so your quick sketch takes 2 to 5 minutes. A measured quick sketch should take maybe 10 to 15 minutes. And that at that point, we still not drawn any details. So we start drawing details after. And that was what I'd call a detailed sketch. And after the detailed sketch, we erase our grids and we start drawing. So I'll show you a couple things. Let's look at this big drawing and see how we can do this. So today what I want to show you is really how to get started on your quick sketch, how to map this out, and I will do a more realistic drawing down the line. But let's get there. So, and I think I'm actually going to zoom in on this for you a little bit. So let's pause this for a second. So I know it's a little hard to see, but I've zoomed in now. And there is a halfway mark here and a halfway mark here. Like I said, I talked about this in my prior lesson. You could fold the paper to get these lines, but if you fold the paper, then you've got a big folded piece of paper and it's not going to work for you. My paper is actually curving a little bit. And by the way, if yours is curving, paper kind of has a memory. And if you're gentle with it, you can just kind of roll it very gently. Be careful not to crease it. And you can just kind of fold it back the other direction to get it to kind of lay flat for you again. That's working a little bit better. Now, something about this drawing is before I start my quick sketch, one thing I do like to do is I like to get the angle of the mouth and the angle of the eyes. A lot of times these are the same. Notice the eyes on this photograph are at an angle, and if you look at the corners of the mouth, the corners of the mouth and the corners of the eyes as I lay my pencil and pen together are about the same. So instead of estimating this, I actually like to teach my students, and I do this in my own drawings, is draw this line across this paper and then transfer that to our large paper. So let's do it. So here we go. So what I'm going to do is actually use my big yardstick for this. All right, here is my large yardstick, and I am going to very carefully place this from the corners of his eyes. So from where I see the whites creasing, if you don't have a clear corner of the eye, like on this side, I don't really have a corner. So I just kind of need to pick where I want that to be. I could go from this corner to the lower corner, but I'm probably going to go to the upper corner here to get a good angle, because that's about the angle of the mouth. So that's what I'm going to do. So here we go. I'm going to put my pen right where I want my corner, and I'm using a red pen so it's a little bit easier to see. So here we go. And my other part of my ruler is right on the white of the eye here. I know it's a little hard to see. And I'm literally drawing that line right across my paper. And I'm going to use that when I scale this up. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the mouth. So I'm lining it up. I'm comparing it to the angle of the eyes just to try to get it fairly close. Doesn't really matter if it matches at all. Span your fingers so you don't move your ruler. Now you can do this in pencil, you can do this in pen. I would not do this in a fat marker because you'll take up too much of your image. But you could always reprint this for later, for details down the line, but you want to get those angles. All right, and now I'm going to pull my big paper up and show you what we can do with this. So I wanted to point out a couple things here. These are just regular calipers for measuring. You don't need calipers, but they're very, very, very handy for measuring. And by the way, I went ahead and I darkened up my grid. You don't want your grid to be dark because when you're all done with this drawing, you want to erase it and it'll just vanish and you won't see that you used a grid. But I want you to be able to see where my grid is, so I darkened it. These are scaling calipers. Now you can buy expensive ones of these. You can also buy some cheap ones on Amazon for like $10 that I use in my classroom. These were I used to use these for sculpting, and these are some that I actually made out of wood. The idea is you can move this wing nut up and down depending on if you want to double, triple, quadruple, or even make something 10 times the original size. And the idea is you measure with the one side and the other side doubles for something like what we're doing. These unfortunately are not super accurate, but these do exist and they're very helpful. What I'm going to be doing today is just doubling my measurements. And so when I measure off of here, I will then double the measurement. So instead of just going, oh, okay, that line from the center line would be right here, what I'm going to do is go, it's 1, put my pencil at the bracket, and go 2 to see where it should be. So that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to show you how we're basically going to measure and double everything that we measure and put on the eye line and the mouth line, and then do a quick sketch. And that will be what we're going to do in this first lesson. So here we go. I'm going to turn off my small webcam again. All right, so here we go. So if you look at what we've done here, we now can measure exactly where this diagonal would be and where this diagonal would be, put it on our large drawing, and then when you're drawing the eyes and the mouth, you'll know exactly where to put it. You know what, I have a light that's casting a lot of shadow here. I'm going to pull that off and we'll be right back. So let's measure this up. So first, I always recommend whenever you're measuring anything, measure it from the closest grid line. So I've got my halfway point here. Both of these lines are closer to the middle line than they are from the edge. You'll have more accuracy if you're measuring a short distance than a long distance. So first, I'm going to measure where the mouth line would be. And I'm just going to measure with my calipers very carefully on my 2 red lines. I know that's a little hard to see, but I'm trying to show you both papers. So just so you can see close up, I'm measuring to the edge, right along the edge of the paper as to where that line is. So I said I'm going to double it. So here's what I mean. I'm going to go right to my grid, right to the tip. I'm going to make a mark, and then I'm going to measure from that mark and measure the same distance. So I've measured it once, twice, because everything we measure off of here will be double on the larger one. And I'm actually going to put, this sounds crazy, but I'm going to put a little M there for mouth, because you will be surprised as you're drawing, even though this is a diagonal, you can get mixed up as to what's your halfway line and what's your mouth line and what's your eye line. And if you've just got a little M there, that's helpful. For the center line, I'm going to put a C, which of course is secret code for center. All right, let's get the other one down. And this goes pretty quickly. So I'm not going to zoom in for this one. Now this line is actually closer to the bottom. So I said I wouldn't zoom in, but here I go. So here's my line, and here is my bottom edge. I'm trying to be as careful as I can as I measure this. So that bottom edge, this bottom edge is this, right? So here I go. I'm just taking my time with this. Now, if you don't have fancy dancy calipers, you could measure with a ruler, but what I like about this method is you technically don't need a ruler. I also teach in my drawing class how you can measure something with a pencil. Like you can point to this line with a pencil and then measure with the tip of your finger like this. So the distance would be here. And then I could go 1, 2 and measure that distance. That's not actually the one I'm measuring right now, but if you'd like to see that more in depth, I teach it in my drawing class. All right, so here is my other mouth line. I just put an M there for mouth. And now I'm going to go ahead and line it up with my ruler, being very careful. I line it up on my first line, kind of put my thumb there so it can pivot, and go to my second one. Make sure I'm still on my line, because terrible things can happen if we get this wrong. Now this should also be a light line. I am not going to make it light though. I'm going to make it dark, because I want you to be able to see it. And I'm also going to draw it a little bit beyond my grid. So when I'm all done, if I'm shading and this line is gone, I can re-find it here and just put my ruler there if I need to remeasure later on. This will come in really handy. All right, so we've got our mouth line. Hooray, let's get in our eye line next. So just as an example of what I was talking about, I could measure this with the tip of my finger touching to the center line, the tip of my pencil touching the measuring line, and I could measure it 1, make a little mark right there, 2 with my finger, and it would be right there. Now, this is not as accurate as measuring with calipers. So let's just see how close I got. So here is my center line. Here are my calipers. And I'm actually going to bring in some scaling calipers as we get farther along in this drawing. And I'll show you how to use those. You can buy them, like I said, for about 10 bucks at Amazon. So my first line was already wrong. It should be there. And then the second line doubled my mistake. So it should be here. I'm going to put an E there for my eye. And I'm going to erase my wrong lines before I get mixed up. And then let's do the same thing on the other side. So which line is this closest to? It's closest to the middle. I know it's very hard to see that because it's so dark. That's why I use the red pen. So on this one, tip to tip, that is from the center line to where the eye line is right there. And you can just always remember, where is that eye line? It's in the lower left block. So this is going to go in the lower left block. So I'm going to measure to right here. That's my first line. And that is my second line. So this is also going to get an E for eye. And let's draw it in. So believe it or not, we're actually getting somewhere. And we're just about to start our quick sketch. So I'm going to go right on my first line right here. Pivot down to my second one. Make sure I'm on both. Span my hands. I'm going to tweak this a little bit. And like I said, I will draw it dark, but there should be a light line. And now I've got the angle of my eye and the angle of his mouth. And I know that his mouth is going to be right along this line somewhere, corner to corner, and his eyes will be right here. So one of the things I talk about is whenever we're about to draw something, you want to take a look, if we're gridding it, as to where things are on the grid. So notice both eyes are in the right-hand square. The top right-hand square, both eyes are in there. And they're right along the line, right? The nose cuts across the middle of these two rectangles. And the mouth is kind of in the middle, left to right, of this block. And it's right along my line here. So when I go to draw that, I want to be aware of that. Where do the shoulders cross? Well, here's my block. Halfway is here. So this is a little higher than a third of the way up the block. So asking where things are is great for a quick sketch. Now remember, we're going to simplify. His shoulder is touching this bottom corner. That makes that easy. It's hard to see what's going on up here. It's very dark, but his head is, basically an oval, right? It's kind of football shaped down here because of his chin. And his head almost touches, it does touch here, and almost touches here, and it's empty in the corner. So we know where these things are. So when we're doing our quick sketch, it won't be too tough. And where's his ear? It goes above the halfway line here, and it attaches about halfway across this block. So let's do a quick sketch. So a quick sketch is where we're just mapping things out. And I recommend don't measure on a quick sketch, estimate, okay? So we know the oval is up here, and I'm holding it so you can kind of see what I'm looking at. Definitely look at your reference when you're drawing. Here is the top. So I'm just drawing this big arch for the head so far. Now, my lines are a little light, and that's because I want to keep them light so I can erase them. But I'm actually going to make them a little darker than I normally would so you can see it. So here's the arch on the top of the head, and we're simplifying, right? So it's not going to stay like this. So how far across is the forehead? Well, here's halfway. It's about a third. So third would be right around here is where we should bring this line down. And it doesn't matter if we get it right away. It doesn't matter at all. It's going to help us the more accurate it is. But I'm not a big believer in making your quick sketch accurate. I'm a big believer in doing it quickly. All right, so my shoulder starts down. Let's finish our oval. So the reason I started to move away is one of the things I teach is if you're not exactly sure where you are in the drawing, move to a different part. So I'm looking at where his jaw attaches, and it's about halfway up this block, which is more about there. And then it cuts across like this. So I don't know if you can see this big oval shape I have. It's going to change a lot as we move ahead in this drawing, but there we go. All right, so we know his shoulder is a little higher than a third up, and it's just going to curve into his head here. We know that his neck is coming down, let's see, right about in the middle of this block, right about here, and curves down over. We know that his shoulder comes up here and connects to his neck. And let's see what else we've got. We've got this curve of his shirt, making kind of a triangle there, and the curve of his shirt stopping over here. So I'm just simplifying where these things should be. So let's get some features in here. So I would say for your quick sketch, you want a head shape, shoulder shape, shirt shape, ears, eyes, nose, mouth, and general hairline. We're not looking for any details right here, but we will eventually. So I'm moving this around so you can see what I'm doing. Normally, just put it on the table near you so you can see what you're doing. And if you're following along with something you've printed out, just put it where you can see it. So the ear, we said, makes an appearance above here. It's kind of half of a heart shape. It does extend a little bit beyond the hair. It curves into the jawline a little bit. And you can see that, my neck is definitely not right yet, and I'm not concerned about that. The hair kind of curves down to a point here, making an appearance in the bottom rectangle. So I'm just going to kind of simplify this hairline. Now, before I throw in the rest of this hair, let's get the eyes in, because that's going to help me position everything. But you can just see I've got shoulders, neck, ear, head, not hair, but we will. So where's the eye start? Check it out. It starts right in this corner right here. So I'm just going to kind of throw that general shape in. I mentioned you kind of want to simplify the eyes as almonds, but we are not going to stay there. So that is not what we're going to be doing eventually. So I'm a firm believer in drawing what something looks like, not what it is. And that'll make more sense later. But there's kind of that general shape for the eye. I'm not sure if that's right at all. I can see the other eye goes almost right to the side of his face. So as I draw that in, I'm just going to draw that almond shape up. Now we'll be changing this, but check it out. They go right along our line like we talked about. Where's the mouth? The mouth we said is about in the middle of this block, which would be kind of right around here. It goes almost to the side of his face. And we're just going to throw in that simple curve right there. And we can see it's got that kind of quintessential V shape that lips tend to have right there. And then we've got our nose kind of cutting across like a triangle, making an appearance right on that edge. And then kind of curving up like this. Okay, so we've got eyes, nose, mouth, and now we can put our hairline in. So hairline in this block is about halfway up. That's going to be right around here. He's got all this flyaway hair going on up here, so I'm just going to put a little bit of that shape in there, kind of coming around here. And we have got a simplified sketch. Very, 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 very simple. This is a simplified sketch, not looking very much like him yet, but I promise it will. So let's stick around, and we will go from quick sketch to what I call a measured quick sketch. Measured quick sketch will be our next lesson, but we've doubled everything and very, very, very simplified. And just to see where we're going, it's not going to stay looking like this. It's going to start looking like this. So believe it or not, we are going to go from crazy simple sketch to very detailed sketch. So stick around and I will show you that. So if you're thinking, that drawing looks terrible, I would agree. And your quick sketch should be pretty simple, simplified sketch. And what I think is so important is to allow yourself to have that quick sketch where it's not filled with lots of details. What a lot of my students do is they get paralyzed and they take forever and they measure everything as they begin and never move beyond that initial sketch, and they end up with a very detailed sketch and all their proportions are wrong. And you know what happens when we measure them? Then they don't want to change them. And this happens to all of us, right? We erase everything and we start over and we end up with 1,000 lines. So we're going to move these lines once. And then when we put our details in, we will know where they're going to go. All right. I'm Tim Ellis. I hope you enjoyed my lesson. And I have a whole bunch more. I will link to the lesson where we did the grid below. And if you have any interest in taking my actual online drawing class, it is asynchronous, and I will take you from very, very beginning drawing where you need to know absolutely nothing to being able to draw like what you just saw. And I hope you check that out. It's on my website. I'll put a link to that too. All right, Tim Ellis, please like me, share it, and subscribe. All right, thanks. Bye-bye.